Stop. Before you do anything else right now, before you scroll, before you skip ahead to the next thing waiting for your attention, I need you to hear this. God doesn't want it. Not about your worth, your calling, or your future. God is telling you not to do what is about to happen if you don't listen to this message. This is marked as an emergency, not because of the algorithm. Because what comes after these few minutes will either change your life or make you wish you had paid more attention to it when it was there. This is where we start. Something is set up by God. A certain arrangement put in place just for you at this point in your story. This is not true in general. God has been planning a series of events, a coming together of people, resources, and times for longer than you think. The enemy also knows about it. The enemy has been watching as things happen. The enemy has also set up exactly one trap right in the setup. One particular method was set up to make the person for whom it was intended either ignore the whole thing as normal or run away from it as dangerous. And it's not tragic that most of the chosen ones die in dramatic, obvious ways. The sad thing is that most of the chosen ones are killed by something quiet, by a reaction pattern that is so common that they don't even think about it as a choice when it happens. It's important for me to be clear about what a divine setup really is. Since the term is sometimes used in a vague way, the way God sets things up is not a test of how good you are. You are not being watched by God to see if you fall into this trap. It's not a challenge meant to help you become a better person. For those who are chosen, a divine setup is when God lines up the right people, events, and resources to move them from one level of their assignment to the next. Character growth may happen as a result. It's a way to make a transition. People who were chosen will remember this moment as the one that changed everything. That point where they changed from who they were before to who they became after. It's not always exciting when God sets things up. From the outside, some of them look very normal. Some of them are a normal conversation, a normal choice, or a normal message that comes at a normal time. The uniqueness of the setup isn't always clear from the packaging. That choice can be seen in the results, in the way things change when you choose to fully engage with what God put there versus when you choose to scroll past. This is why divine setups are so important to the story as a whole. When a chosen person walks through a divine setup, they do more than just move their own calling forward. They go into the next season with a level of authority that they wouldn't have had without that passage. This is clear to the enemy. The enemy doesn't just want to hold you up. The enemy wants to keep you from getting what you can only get by going through the specific thing God set up. This is why the trap isn't put around the setup. You won't see it as a trap because you are already in what God is doing. I'm going to talk about 5 different ways this trap can appear in a divine setting. And I want you to listen for the one you recognize. The one that wasn't the most dramatic or extreme. The one you've actually seen or used. Because the enemy doesn't make traps that work for everyone. Even when you thought you were being smart, careful, or wise, the enemy studies each person. That particular history and wound that is closest to what God is planning right now. What's more, the trap is made up of things you already know and have every reason to trust. On the first form is the dismissal of familiarity. This is when a divine setup shows up in completely normal packaging. There was no thunder, no supernatural confirmation, and no deep sense of importance to mark the occasion. It looks like something you've seen or heard before, but in a different setting. A chance that doesn't feel very special. A door that opens quietly and doesn't feel heavy like you thought it would. A God set up the door to carry. If this were really from God, I would feel something more important than what I am feeling right now. Is a trapped thought pattern. So the chosen one goes through without really getting involved. They're in the body but not in the depths. There is engagement at the surface level of the encounter, but the deeper invitation is not seen. The setup goes through and the chosen one never knows what was available inside it. The wound redirect is the second type. This one is the most accurate of the 5. The enemy finds the exact wound from the past that is closest to what God is trying to do now. It's not an old wound. It's a new one. The one with a live edge still on it. You still have to pay for the last time something looked like this. It ended in a certain kind of disappointment that cost you something. When you last followed something that seemed like a calling, it put you in a place where you felt exposed and alone. So when God sets things up the way they are, the enemy doesn't use theology to argue against them. The enemy doesn't tell you that you're not good enough or that God doesn't love you. The enemy just tells you to look at the evidence from the last time instead. And the chosen one steps back from the edge of what God planned because it feels like a reasonable way to protect themselves, not out of fear. There is a real protection reflex. The wound that set it off is real. It only took the enemy pointing at it at the right time and from the right angle. The third type is that of the urgency inversion. This is what happens when God is doing something in order and the enemy messes up the timeline. God sets things up in layers. The arrangement is set up in a certain way. For the setup to do what it's supposed to do, it needs to go through a process of getting ready. During this time, the enemy adds a false sense of urgency by saying that if this really came from God, things should be moving faster. So, either the chosen one gives up on what God planned because it looks like it's stuck, or they start to push the timing in ways that break the order that made the plan possible. They act quickly instead of going at the right speed for the situation. And the plan that called for the chosen one to stay put and move at a certain speed can't stand up to the pushing. This is the fourth form, which is the fake resolution. This is the most complicated of the 5 and the one that people are most likely to mistake for a blessing. Before the divine setup fully arrives and the sequence is finished, the enemy shows what the setup was supposed to do. It's not necessarily a bad version. It's just good enough. It's a relationship that seems like the right one, but comes before the growth that's needed to keep it going. A platform that gives people visibility before giving them the depth and roots that visibility needs. A financial opportunity that makes people dependent instead of free because the setup wasn't able to bring about the character growth that it was supposed to. It looks like the person who was chosen gets an answer. The stress and hunger that were meant to keep them going during the whole setup process are released early. So when the actual setup time comes, they are not ready to go into it. It wasn't the fake that killed them. The fake thing didn't need the real thing when it got there. We have the fifth type, which is the legitimacy challenge. When the setup happens, the enemy right away gives a religious or logical reason why it shouldn't happen. Who told you for sure that this came from God? What proof do you have that this isn't just a coincidence or something you're hoping will happen? Do you know how many people have been wrong when they thought God was doing something? Sometimes terrible things go horribly wrong. This form works best against chosen ones who have a deep intellectual and spiritual life, value real discernment, and have seen others get off track by claiming divine guidance for decisions that were only good for themselves. The enemy turns the discernment that was gained through loyalty into a weapon. It makes sense to accept the challenge. It sounds like good sense. It comes at just the right time to stop people from getting into what God planned. The chosen person doesn't feel like they just walked out of a set. Instead, they feel responsible and careful. I'd like to ask you something straight out now. Which one of these 5 did you know? Not the theologically most interesting one, the one that made your heart beat faster, or the one that fit a certain season you've been through or a certain time you are in now. The reason God told you, no, 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 wasn't because the setup was too dangerous. This means that one of these 5 traps was set up by the enemy. And the most honest and skilled chosen ones walk right into the trap from inside the very thing God set up for their progress without even realizing it. Please know that every seed you plant in this mission grows into a torch that shines in someone else's darkness. Whether by buying a coffee, making a donation, or becoming a member of our community, does not go to a channel. Your actions are supporting a divine mission to save lost souls. But more than your support, we want your presence. When you head to our community through the link in the description or the pinned comment, you aren't just visiting a site. You are entering a community of like-minded believers. This is a sanctuary where you can post your prayer requests, lift up the burdens of others, and engage in daily discussions with a family that speaks the language of faith. Whether you are joining one of our membership tiers for deeper study, sowing a seed of faith, or simply joining our daily morning prayers, you are helping us build a global altar of worship. Heaven moves through willing voices, but it grows through a community that stands together. Each gift you give acts as living water for those in our community seeking healing and hope. Give and it will be given to you is the promise that sustains our shared mission. I invite you now to step out of the shadows and into this circle of prayer. Come with purpose. Join the conversation and plant your seed in fertile ground. Let's open the heavens together. Release your seed today. Join our community and see what God brings back into your life. We're going to do something different today. We'll have a good look at it before the time to decide comes. I'd like to know more about how the trap works. Not just the 5 types we talked about in the beginning of this message, the parts that make them work. Because you can spot the trap after the fact if you know how it looks from the outside. But if you know how it works, you can spot it right away while you are in the setup before the decision time has passed. The trap works because of a certain dynamic that appears in all major biblical stories about God. I have read and thought about these stories a lot. So I can say for sure that the pattern is not by chance. Different parts of the stories of Joseph, Ruth, Daniel, and the disciples on the road to Emmaus all use the same mechanism. This is not a coincidence because the enemy knew how it worked before anyone else. The mechanism is the same. And this is how it works. A moment of active undefended receptivity is needed for every divine setup to do what it was meant to do. And that particular state of being open and not defending yourself is exactly what the trap is meant to stop. A general explanation is not enough for me. So I want to use a specific story to show this. This is the story of Elisha and the servant in Dothan. When Elisha prayed for his eyes to be opened, God showed him an army of horses and chariots of fire. This is what most people know about the story. The supernatural part is interesting and that's what keeps coming up. But most people don't notice what was going on before Elisha prayed. That servant was already there awake and looking at the same thing that Elisha was looking at. Both of them could get the information at the same time. Same eyes, same morning, same place, and the same threat that can be seen around the city. It wasn't information that made the difference. The difference was how open they were. While Elisha was in that state, he could see what was really there. Because the servant was scared, his perception was narrowed. He could only see the obvious threat and he couldn't see the bigger reality that was also in the same space. When Elisha prayed, God did not change the past for the servant. God gave the servant access to something that was already true. The setup had been there the whole time. The servant was not in the right frame of mind to receive it. Please think about that for a moment before we go on. When Elisha prayed, the setup did not happen. It was already there with the chariots. The angelic presence was there already. There was something that the servant needed to keep him from being destroyed by fear. Right where the fear was happening, the resource did not come from the prayer. After the prayer, the receiver opened and the resource that had been there but hard to get to was now there and easy to get to. This is a model of what happens in a divine setting. The arrangement is ready to go as soon as you decide you are worthy. In order to receive it, you need to be open to it. This is the way things work in every divine arrangement. The plan is now in place. The possibilities, the timing, the people, and the help are all in the same place where you are. The arrangement's presence or absence doesn't make a difference between the chosen one who goes through it and the one who does it without ever knowing what was there. It's the presence or absence of the inside condition needed to take in what the arrangement has to offer. Now I want to talk about something that we haven't talked about much because it makes us feel bad to say it directly. It's not a spiritual failure that most chosen ones aren't in that state of mind when the divine setup comes. They don't have a lack of faith, a character flaw, or proof that they aren't really chosen. There is a certain way that the brain processes information when it is under a lot of stress and pressure, and that way of processing affects the ability to be open and not defend yourself, which is exactly what a divine setup needs. We'll talk about this again in a few parts. I want you to keep it as a question for now. Even though you really want to receive what God has for you, why does the reception often feel unfair? Why does having a clear understanding come and go? When you feel very sure about something, why does it go away before you can fully act on it? An individual who has been under constant stress for a long time experiences a certain change in their brain. Something you can measure. Something that the Nobel Prize research will talk about later in this message directly deals with. This is what I want to name for now. This is when you really know something and then quickly lose touch with that knowledge. Being sure of something 1 minute and not sure of it the next. Being able to hear the signal clearly and then hear nothing is not a spiritual symptom. It has to do with the brain, and neurological problems can be fixed neurologically. Let me tell you about a real person whose name is Rachel but whose story is true. And it's the story I get told in more ways than almost any other by people who are really interested in this content. Rachel had been in a certain stage of preparation for years. This wasn't passive preparation. It was active, committed, and expensive preparation. She had said yes to every chance to grow that came her way that season. She had worked on herself. The rules were set by her. She got rid of the debts, relationships, and thought patterns that she knew were holding her back. She was ready by every measure she knew of. Then the divine setup showed up. It wasn't what she had thought it would be like. It came to her as a clear invitation to move into a space that was close to her calling, but not quite her calling as she had been holding it. It came with an unusual messenger, someone she wouldn't have thought God would use based on what she knew about how God was working in her life. It came quietly without an answer from the people she had been asking for an answer. And Rachel did 2 of the 5 things we listed in the first part of this message. She was honest, ready, and truly chosen. She used the familiarity dismissal because she didn't know what the packaging was. Afterward, she used the legitimacy challenge since the sources she had been looking at could not give her proof. The setup is gone, but not for good. God doesn't give up on setups. That being said, the sequence that was set up changed its shape. That window of time, people, and resources coming together in a very specific way was no longer there in the same way. 6 months later, when Rachel finally found out what had been available, she didn't say anything dramatic about regret. There was a quiet sadness over the specific version of the thing that had been planned for that moment, but was no longer available in that form. Also, she talked about something I want to name specifically because I've heard it enough times to know it's not just her. She said that in the weeks after the setup, she kept going back to the memory of the invitation, but not to think about it. Instead, she said, she kept reaching for the quality of what had been there in that first moment of contact. That first flash of knowing before the thinking started. It was as if the deeper part of her knew what the analytical part had thrown out, but she wasn't ready to fully accept that it was over. That going back is important. It is the signal that is trying to be heard after it is too late to act on it. You can see that the receiver is trying to stay open after the transmission was ready. She told me that she knew right away that the invitation meant something important. Below the level of her analytical evaluation, she knew something, but she couldn't hold on to that knowing while the analysis was going on. By the time she finished the discernment process, she had learned, the knowing had gone away, and the analysis had done what it usually does when it doesn't have deep receptivity to balance it out. There was not enough evidence. But wait, let me say something about that experience. It's not a coincidence that knowing comes in the beginning of a divine setup and fades as it's analyzed. It's not intuition that you can't trust that wisdom traditions warn you about at the moment it arrives. It is the most accurate signal that can be used. There is nothing wrong with the signal that makes it fade. The specific neurological condition of the receiver is what it is. Over time, stress and pressure can leave the brain with only a partial capacity. During this time, it becomes much harder to hold open awareness long enough to sustain a signal without immediately putting it into the categories of the analytical mind. The signal comes in. The analytical system starts working on it right away. Also, when the signal is processed, the surface information is kept, but the depth information is lost. You remember that something was important to you. You can't get to what the meaning was pointing to. And the setup that needed you to move from the depth of knowing to the memory of it is gone while you work on it. The problem has now been named with the accuracy it needs. We've given the 5 shapes the trapped can take names. We've talked about what non-defended receptivity is and why it's important for a divine setup to deliver what it holds. We've also talked about what the trap is meant to stop. We've looked at the story of Elisha and the servant in Dothan. We've been with Rachel through the setup that went by and the specific grief of realizing what was available after the fact. And now I want to give you something that will change everything from now on. Not in the end. From the minute after this message is sent. When you do these 3 things, you'll improve what I'll call setup literacy. Knowing how to spot a divine setting while you're in it, rather than only after the fact. These are not general spiritual rules. These are real-world specific steps that can be taken again and again to fix each of the 3 main failure modes we've found. I'll carefully explain each one and then we'll do one of them together in this message before we end. The first practice is to stop and be still. This takes care of the first and fifth types of the trap, which are the familiarity dismissal and the legitimacy challenge. When something that might be a setup comes your way, you must be completely still for 30 seconds before you think about it. Run the discernment process, talk to anyone, or do anything else with the invitation's content. Not to listen for a voice or feel a feeling, but to stop the automatic processing of analysis that starts as soon as you become aware of something at the neurological level. This is important. The analytical mind works at a certain speed and usually finds a solution quickly. The right side of the brain processes information more slowly because it has a deeper capacity for receiving it. This means that the analytical system has to take a moment to give its opinion on what is going on. It's not spiritual to be still for 30 seconds after an invitation comes in. It gives the whole brain a moment to take in what it sees before the faster analytical system sorts it into familiar groups and moves on. It seems too easy for most of the chosen ones to have tried this before. It wasn't a more advanced process that solved the problems that came up while they were still in the process of discernment. They got it done in 30 seconds that they didn't give themselves. There is a certain quality that the analytical system doesn't have that the deeper receptive process does. And you can feel that quality in the silence that follows an invitation before you start to analyze it. It has a certain kind of openness to it. Like the question is left open instead of being pushed right away to be answered. Some people say it feels like warmth. Some people say it feels like a weight in the chest that isn't painful. Some people say it's just knowing something without knowing why they know it. No matter what the word is. The reading that the whole brain makes when both hemispheres have a chance to record what came in together before the left hemisphere starts the processing sequence that tends to narrow the field down to what is already known and put into categories. The signal journal is the second piece of practice. This talks about the second and fourth types of traps, which are the wound redirect and the counterfeit resolution. It's easy to use the signal journal. You write down every time you have the knowing I talked about in the last part of this message. The flash of recognition that comes before the analysis begins. Not the analysis or your judge of how reliable the signal is, what the raw signal felt like, where it was in your body, and what it pointed to at the most basic level before you started to think about it. This practice changes the dynamic because it makes a record that the analytical mind can't go back and look at again. A part of the reason the wound redirect works is that the analytical mind changes the meaning of the signal after the fact. It says that wasn't a real knowing. That was a wishful thought. The record from before the analysis is kept in the signal journal. Over time, as you look back at it, you start to notice a pattern in your own signals that your analytical mind can't ignore because you wrote it down before the analysis was finished. Because you have a record that is more accurate than the fresh memory that your analytical mind would rather work from. You start to trust your own signal. A lot of chosen ones have been in a place for years where they don't trust what they know. It's not that knowing isn't reliable. It's just that the analytical revision process has pushed it aside so many times that the signal is less clear, less sure of itself, and less eager to make itself known than the last time it did so. It was put through a process right away that showed it wasn't enough. This changes when the signal journal is added. There is no spiritual writing in it. It's based on facts. And over the course of weeks and months, evidence changes the chosen one's relationship with their own inner signal in a way that instruction alone does not. Setting up an assumption is the third practice. This talks about the third type of the trap, the urgency inversion. It is the most counterintuitive of the three. The setup assumption says that you start with the idea that God is planning something specific for you right now, even if you can't see it clearly yet. It's not a formula or a belief you're trying to make people believe. It's a way of being that changes what you pay attention to. You are looking for what the sequence needs when you are operating from the setup assumption instead of proof that the sequence is real. You're not asking the same things. This is not a question of is this from God, but of what does God seem to be building here? What do I need to do at this point in the sequence? What you can do at the moment changes because of the shift. Taking this step changes your position from one of defensive evaluation to one of collaborative building. And in that position, the urgency inversion doesn't work as well because you're not comparing the process's speed to something outside of it. Being a part of the process and asking what it needs are two different things. Moving your body in this way is not passive. This posture is more active than the evaluating posture because you have to focus on the whole sequence instead of just one moment at a time. What did this week have to do with what happened 3 weeks ago that could be the next step in something God has been building? What invitation did you get today? What door that looked like it shut was actually just redirected, not turned down? It's not possible for the setup assumption to make setups that weren't there before. It shows the setup that was already going on and that the posture for evaluating was seeing as normal. I want to do something useful. Now that you are reading this message, I want to give you a short exercise to do right now. This is the stillness interrupt used to describe how you feel as you listen to this content. Here is the step-by-step. Take a break. Take a moment. Do not think about whether this message comes from God, applies to you, or has anything to do with where you are. Just pay attention to what you feel in your body right now that came in while you were listening. What is their weight? Is there a warm response or warmth that comes before the analysis of whether the response is reliable? What is something that has been going on in the background of your thoughts that you haven't named yet? What you just noticed is not a feeling as you thought. That's a message. And the habit we're building is the habit of holding it instead of solving it right away. Leaving it there for long enough to give you data that the analytical process can't get to on its own. The plan God has made doesn't need your emotional certainty. It needs you to be open to it. Being open to new things is also a skill that can be learned. One that, as we'll talk about later in this message, is based on a certain neurological foundation that can be fixed no matter how long the stress of your life has been wearing it down. Write down your signal right now. Write down what you saw in those 30 seconds. This is not an analysis. It's just the signal as it was before you decided what to do with it. There is a community here where those signals are respected instead of judged. It also does something when a chosen one names their signal in a place where other people are doing the same thing. The almost cycle starts to break up the isolation. There is more of the knowing instead of less of it. Right now, something is happening in your life that works better when the person it was meant for is part of a group of people who are also learning to be open to what God has planned. Before we get to the end of this message, I want to talk about something that is related to everything we've talked about so far. All of the practices I just talked about depend on a certain level of openness in order to work. If the neurological disconnection that long-term pressure causes has lowered that baseline by a lot, the practices can help, but they can't get to the root of the problem. It's like telling someone how to swim well while they're working in a pool with half of the water taken out. The way you did it is right. The environment isn't good enough. What brings the environment back to life will be talked about next in this message. Why the solution is easier and more accessible than most people in this situation have been led to believe, and what rebuilds the neurological foundation that these practices need to work at their best. Let me tell you what the research actually says about what happens in the brain of someone who has been under a lot of stress, responsibility, and unresolved purpose tension for a long time. I'm going to give you a description that will be more accurate of your experience than most of the reasons people have given you for why you keep getting close to the edge but not crossing it, even though you have tried hard and are truly committed to changing it. The Nobel Prize in 1981 went to Dr. Roger Sperry for his work on what neuroscientists call split brain function through years of careful clinical research. Dr. Sperry showed that the two sides of the brain are designed to work together. This synchronization is what makes the human mind's full processing power available. The left hemisphere's analytical precision and the right hemisphere's depth and receptivity are both working at the same time, adding to the same experience instead of switching off or competing with each other. It is normal for people in this state to be able to hold something open, receive a signal without immediately resolving it, and see the quality of a divine setup rather than just the invitation's content. It doesn't take any work. It's how the synchronized brain works by default. When the synchronization is thrown off, which happens over time as sustained pressure builds up and survival mode is activated, the left hemisphere takes over and the right hemisphere becomes mostly quiet. The person doesn't lose their ability to think and reason. They don't give up their faith, their hope, or their promise. What they lose is the ability for the two processing modes to work together without any problems, which is what makes whole brain awareness possible. The analytical system still works very well. What gets worse is the ability to receive information, which is what makes setup literacy possible. The ability to hold on to a signal before cleaning it up. The ability to know something at a level higher than thinking about it. The ability being talked about in the story of Alicia as being needed to see what is already there. This isn't a figure of speech or a spiritual reading of the facts. This is what the neurological data shows about what long-term pressure does to the brain's ability to work together. So even though the three practices in Part 3 are useful and effective, they work better when the neurological foundation they need is restored to its normal level of function. The practices are like learning how to swim. The full pool is whole brain synchronization. This is the number that most people find hard to believe and then can't forget after hearing it. There is a natural ability for the whole brain to work together in children. So 98% of them are creatively genius level. The synchronization happens naturally without any problems and at the intended level. The same study says that less than 1 in 1,000 people still have that level of synchronization as adults. The rest are only using a portion of their potential, not because they chose to do so, but because modern life with its constant stress, performance pressure, information overload, and stimulation has slowly worn away the synchronization that wasn't meant to depend on anything. Take a moment to think about what that number means for a certain personality. The person who was born with the kind of assignment that needs the whole brain to understand, receive, and act on what God has planned will work for years or even decades with only a small part of the brain power that the assignment needs. It's not a spiritual gap between being clear on your calling and being able to consistently get to the level of knowing that your calling needs in order to be fully lived out. There is a real difference in the level of synchronization between what the brain was designed to do and what it is doing now. An American woman talked about how she felt before she found a way to close this gap. She did everything possible. She tried every practice her community suggested, like prayer, writing in a journal, and meditation. But she kept having the same experience. She thought what they said. She couldn't feel what was really going on. Not in her body and not in the way her days were lived. She said something cleared up after 10 days of something else. A channel that had been closed off was opened up all of a sudden. It wasn't because she worked harder. The receiver had been fixed. Something similar was said by a man from Texas. Someone who had spent years keeping things together for other people while his own life got thin and far away. He said it felt like he was talking into a wall when he prayed. The frequency was right, but the receiver wasn't working. After 2 weeks, he woke up and said that his mind was fully functioning as it should. The fog had been there for so long that he had stopped noticing it as fog. That's because of what the team I'm about to talk about found. A group of neuroscientists in New York led by Dr. Daniel Barron worked on this gap for years. Neurosync technology was used for more than an hour. This is the kind of whole brain activation protocol that is used in certain medical situations to get the two sides of the brain to work together again in healthy people. They took it through a very intense process of compression and refinement to get it down to a targeted 8-minute audio sequence that you should listen to every day with your eyes closed and headphones on. That's all the physical requirements. The smart switch is what they call it. In addition, the name is accurate. It doesn't make you smart in the way that an intelligence test does. Instead, it turns on the whole brain. You use that as your genius level default when you were a kid. The state in which the stillness interrupt does what it's supposed to do. The state where the signal journal starts to make a correct record more quickly than when the brain is only partly in sync. The state where the setup assumption is not something you're trying to hold on to out of faith, but something that comes naturally to you because your whole brain is picking up on what your partial brain is missing. The smart switch is what they call it. If you have tried other sound or frequency-based tools in the past and not been able to make the shift you were hoping for, Dr. Barron makes this very clear on the page where he offers this brainwave product's focus on a specific area of brain activity. Sound frequencies deal with processing sounds without dealing with hemisphere synchronization in the whole brain. The Genius Switch does something very different because its mechanism is different. It was made to specifically deal with hemisphere disconnection, which Dr. Sperry found to be the cause of reduced whole brain capacity. It's not just one frequency or state that's linked to that disconnection. Not everyone can use the Genius Switch. It's for the chosen one who knows that God planned not only the promise but also the mind that needs to follow it. The person who has been honest for years, done the work, heard the call clearly and kept coming back to it even when the evidence wasn't there and is ready to stop seeing the fog as a flaw in their character and start seeing it as something with a specific address. Most people who hear this will scroll on by. They have come to terms with the smaller version of their mind being permanent. You're still here. That isn't a mistake. With that kind of persistence, the person this was made for will be successful. One thing that needs to be named, you can find tracks that sound like this on YouTube or Spotify. They were looked at by Dr. Barron's team. Most of them didn't have any neural sync technology built in at all. They used the name because there isn't much that stops you from calling something that. How it works is what makes the difference. And his team's work is the only place where it works. The only source that has been checked is the direct page. That's where the link below takes you. There is a link to where Dr. Barron put this in the video description and in the comment below that has been pinned. The link takes you straight to their page. Before you decide what to do, you can read everything about what they built and how they built it. There isn't any stress. There is full clarity in everything that is laid out. This is the structure for access. It costs about $300 per session to do neurofeedback in person with a qualified professional who uses hemisphere synchronization protocols. The cost of clinical-grade neurofeedback hardware for home use ranges from 5 to 7 cents. This does not include software or ongoing support. Dr. Barron and his team made this just for someone who doesn't have those resources and can't afford another thing that stands in the way of them getting the neurological foundation they need to do their calling. People who work in neuroscience said that what was built here was a great deal even at $500. Not $100, not $200, not $500. The price of the standard release is $49. There is a $10 or $399 price. Drop on the page that the link in the description takes you to. As this awakening grows inside you, know that helping with this mission is not a joke. It is a sign from God. You can support this work through the link in the description or the pinned comment. Whether by buying a coffee, making a donation, or becoming a member of our COF community. By doing so, you become part of Jesus' plan to save souls who are still stuck in fog. Every seed turns into light that fights against darkness. If you water others, you will be watered yourself. Jesus says, this is not history. It is a living promise about your future. Come into this moment with faith and a plan. What God has already planned for your life can be unlocked through your giving. The guarantee is unconditional and doesn't have a time limit. The 8-minute scene can only be used once. It's good for months of use every day. If you don't feel the shift in openness and awareness that the 18,000 people who have used this have said they felt, you can contact them and get your money back. There are no rules and no questions. There are 4 bonuses. The best teacher on the Calm platform leads you through a guided visualization. A grocery list of the specific foods that are easy to find in the American market and that neurological research has linked to active suppression of whole brain function. Simple substitutions can usually cut monthly grocery costs by AD to 120. This is a basic book from more than 100 years ago that most modern practices based on how to receive and recognize things are based on. It also includes a daily habits guide that is designed to support the neurological conditions that allow whole brain synchronization to happen all day, not just during practice time. This is something I want to say to the person who has been reading this message and finding themselves in it. The 5 trap types, the story of the setup that didn't work and the practices. If those descriptions didn't sound like something you've thought about or are living right now, then what? Dr. Barron built isn't something you should add to the work you're already doing. It is restoring the capacity that the work needs to be done. The link is in the note that was pinned and below it. Before you end this video, go there. You can see how it's set up in the comments right now. And giving what you see a name changes the connection between what you see and what you do. The tool doesn't stand in for God. The tool doesn't take the place of obedience. It doesn't give up for you. The door doesn't close itself. You don't need any tools for what God is doing in you. But a tool that heals the receiver makes what God is doing land in the right place more often. There is one more thing we need to talk about before this message ends. There isn't a single moment that you either catch or miss forever in the divine plan that God has made for you. God doesn't plan something for someone and then take it away after a while. In a setup though, each window does have its own settings. The right people, the right time, and the right amount of resources and readiness to read a certain version of the passage. Those people aren't always patient. The setup that God has ready for you right now has a certain quality that is present this season, but will be different next season. What was said earlier brings back the ability to see that quality, hold on to it without losing it in the analysis, and move on from it before the configuration changes. That's what the 18,000 people who used it said. It wasn't that their lives got easier. It was just that they could accept what was always being given to them. We're almost done with this message. And I want to be here at the end with everything I brought to it so far. Because I want you to understand something about the time you are in now. That you have what this message said. You got to this video at a certain point in your story. Whether that point is in the middle of a season of preparation, on the edge of something you've been working toward, or just plain worn out from years of hard work that hasn't led to the passage you've been working toward. You brought a certain amount of weight with you. This message wasn't meant to add to that weight. It was made to give you the exact details that change what the weight means. It's not that the work was bad. You weren't wrong. The instrument was just not working at full capacity. The setup is real. The trap can be seen. And the capacity needed to get through the setup and avoid the trap can be restored. That is not a general piece of advice. Dr. Daniel Barron and his team in New York have done decades of Nobel Prize-winning research to back up that claim. There is also written evidence from 18,000 people who were in a similar situation to you. Before they made the choice, this message is building toward the capacity can be restored. Not eventually and not after a long process of extra preparation that starts today and lasts for 8 minutes a day. This is what I think about you based on the fact that you stayed for the whole message, not just a general one. Most of the people you know can't get to the level of commitment you have been showing. Sincerely following something that has cost you things and you have kept following even though it cost you. You've had moments of deep clarity that you couldn't fully sustain. These moments have a little haunted you, like how a signal that you couldn't hold on to haunts the person who knows the signal was real. Those clear moments were not signs that your faith, openness, or character had failed. They were the whole brain briefly working together to give you a reading of what was planned for you. It wasn't a sign of spiritual weakness that you couldn't hold them. Your brain has been running on partial synchronization for longer than you may think. This is the way it works. It was never the clarity that was wrong. It lasted for a while. What you see doesn't change when the synchronization is brought back. It's how long you can remember what you see before the computer records it in a category. It knows and moves on to the next thing. 8 minutes a day. The 39 guarantee that doesn't matter what. There is a link in both the description and the comment that was pinned. Before you end this video, go there. At this point in the message, I'd rather be specific than motivational. More spiritual content doesn't talk about the experience of getting clear, losing clarity, and having the pattern repeat. The problem is fixed by restoring the neurological base that keeps the clarity going. That's not the same kind of solution that most people have been given. It doesn't tell you to work harder, dig deeper, or find a better way to practice. It talks about the mechanism. You can make the practices you already have a lot more effective by fixing the mechanism. The signal gets stronger and stays strong. The knowing is now available all the time instead of just sometimes. It is no longer possible for the trap to work in the space between the signal and the action. In this space, I'd like to do something I don't always do at the end of a message. In the clearest language I can use from this side of the screen, I want to describe the plan God has made for you right now. You have been getting ready. It has taken longer and cost more than you thought it would to get ready. And there's a part of you that has been wondering in the quieter times if the preparations are leading to something or if you've just been in a long holding pattern that will never end. The point of this message was to give you the answer to that question. Things are getting ready for something. God doesn't prepare people for a long time without finally leading them to the part they were getting ready for. The plan is real. There is a window there. This message taught you the words to describe it and the neurological background to know why you have been standing on the edge instead of crossing over. Now take 30 seconds. No more instructions were given. There were 30 seconds of silence before the closing statement. Let what this message said sink into the part of you that can handle it at the level needed by the setup. The part that doesn't have to check to see if this is reliable before getting it. The part of this message that recognized itself in the first 3 minutes and has been getting more proof of what it already knew for the rest of it. The signal is what you felt in those 30 seconds. That's the knowing that was always there but was cut off by the neurological disconnect that this work is meant to fix. That which knows about you has not been wrong. Everything has been right about you the whole time. Now things are different because you are taking the exact step that will help you hold it again so that you can act with the confidence it deserves. Like the quality you felt for 30 seconds, that quality has been there for you in flashes during the seasons of preparation. The quality that God set up for you was always going to need you to be able to keep up. That quality is not made by what was described. You can already get to it. It gets rid of the neurological barrier that makes it happen every so often. The chosen one who does 8 minutes of meditation every day for 30 days says it's not like getting something new, but like being able to hold what was always there. It used to only happen for 10 seconds, but now it lasts for 10 minutes. And during those 10 minutes, the thing the signal points to can happen. It wasn't really when the signal only lasted 10 seconds. I'd like to end this message with something that is as clear and direct as it can be. No. God said that wasn't a turn down. At this point in your story, that was the clearest and safest thing you could have said. Say no to the trap that was set up inside the setup. No to the dismissal based on familiarity. No to the wound change. No to the change in urgency. Say no to the fake resolution. No to the challenge to legitimacy. No to everything the enemy has been using to keep you on the edge of what God planned for you without going inside it. The no was a safety measure because the yes is real. The plan is real. The plan God has been working on in your life is real and happening right now. You don't have to be completely sure about it before you start working on it. You have to be open to it, and you are getting open to it again. If you can say this out loud right now, I can see the setup. I let go of the trap I go through. Take the time to say it. Don't use it as a formula. It sounds like a statement from someone who can now describe what has been going on and understands the neurological background of why crossing through is possible now but might not have been in previous seasons. What the brain needs has been given to it. The instrument is being tuned up again. The window is wide open. God doesn't get things ready and then leave them. God doesn't plan something and then take it back. Right now, the arrangement is very important from the point of view of the person who set up the trap. What looks like a closed door from inside is always a threshold with a certain shape. Today you were given the tools you need to figure out the configuration, the signal clarity to tell the difference between the real arrangement and the fake one that was put inside it. The brain's ability to hold on to the signal long enough for action to be taken before the analytical system takes over. Also, I have something I want to say directly to the person reading this who is thinking this sounds right, but I'm not sure this message was meant for me. That particular thought that the message is only for people in a better or more certain situation than yours is the fifth trap form. The challenge to legitimacy was about the message itself, not how it was set up. This is the most elegant version of the mechanism, and figuring it out is the last step in learning how to set things up that this message was meant to encourage. You're not in the almost cycle because someone else picked you instead. You are leaving the almost cycle because you got what the cycle was keeping you from getting, and the leaving isn't happening slowly. The setup ups that change paths are specific. They're here and the person they were meant for is ready. Feel free to leave a comment below if this message hit you where it was meant to. This is your story. Tell me which of the 5 types of traps you saw most clearly. What did you notice during the quiet 30 seconds? Please let me know if the signal was there. This community grows when those who are chosen are clear about what they receive instead of being vague. Someone else here is free to be specific because of how specific you are, and the trap loses its grip when it comes to specificity. Send this video to the special someone in your life who is on the edge of their setup right now and doesn't even know it. Who is in the middle of getting ready but is beginning to doubt that the work is leading somewhere. The language in this message is important to them and they need it before the window stops being open. Sign up if you haven't already. The conversation that began today will continue in the next message, which will add to what you have already read. People who stay in this conversation also find that the almost cycle isn't as easy to get to over time. It wasn't because they became more spiritually disciplined, but because what they got in this space changed the spiritual and neurological base on which the cycle was built. I'll talk to you again in the next message. Show up as the person who can see the setup. You are about to enter your divine future. But remember, this breakthrough is not for you alone. Your testimony is the bridge someone else will use to reach their own miracle. Archangel Michael is inviting you to visit community through the link in the description or the pinned comment. Whether by buying a coffee, making a donation, or becoming a member of our community does not go to a channel. Your actions are supporting a divine mission to save lost souls. By joining our like-minded community, you are no longer praying in isolation. You are adding your voice to a global sanctuary where we discuss the Word daily and stand in the gap for one another. This is not poetry. When Jesus says, "Give and heaven will open over you." On this platform, every seed you plant turns into oil for your destiny, fire for your calling, and a hedge of safety for your family. Now is your time. Step into our community prayer wall. Share your heart. And as you give, watch God multiply what you let go of. Let's finish this journey together. Visit our community now. Join the family and see your heavens open. Before we get to the end of this powerful story, let's reflect on this deep truth. You did not find this message by accident. This is a divine appointment meant specifically for you. You are being invited into a protected, faith-filled community at the link in the description and pinned comment. A place where divine abundance is not just a hope but a promise built on the Word. By heading to the site right now, you are unlocking access to a sacred community of like-minded believers. When you join our membership tiers, you gain immediate entry to powerful content, daily devotions, and divine insights that are hidden from the world. This is your chance to enter a sanctuary where you will receive spiritual guidance, unwavering support on our prayer wall, and speedy progress toward your destiny. Do not let this moment of destiny pass you by. Your breakthrough is waiting. Join our inner circle through the exclusive link in the description. This is how you guarantee you never miss the personalized messages and spiritual warfare tools meant to elevate your life. If you feel called to deepen your connection, the link is waiting for you in both the pinned comment and the description. For those who want to amplify this work and carry the light home, you can find our guided ebooks and Bibles in the pinned comment. Whether you join as a member or sow a seed through our resources, your presence and energy change the world. Take the step. Your abundance awaits.